We've gotten through the first two of the 5 components of understanding your true cost of drilling. For the third component, let's talk about one of your favorite parts, manpower. You've said before that many companies have no idea what their manpower actually costs.
Absolutely. Yeah, manpower is a tricky one, and it's something that is very important to take a look at. So we've spent a lot of time building a manpower document that is critical for organizations to really understand how much it costs to employ their workforce. Because let's face it, once you've lined out all your employees and you've taken a look at all the costs that it takes to employ them, payroll taxes, benefits, 401k, any type of other benefits that you pay that employee, right? And you roll all those up and you get to the rate per hour that it actually costs them, that's what we call a fully burdened rate. Okay. So if their hourly rate is $20 and it actually costs them $27 to go out and perform a service or do their job, that $27 is their fully burdened rate, right? The difference between the two, 27 and 20, $7 is the employee's burden rate. But we like to look at fully burdened rate, and when we're quoting jobs, submit bids, calculate gross profit margin targets using that fully burdened rate. That makes sure that you're capturing all these other costs that many companies forget about or don't realize that they need to include in their bids. That is a big misunderstanding when quoting jobs, and that is a big part of becoming a profitable drilling organization.
So you recommend creating a manpower schedule?
Absolutely. A manpower schedule is the best place to start. It doesn't have to be at the end of the year. It doesn't have to be during budget season, right? You can start today, in the middle of the year, the end of the year, it doesn't matter, but the key is to just start, right? And we have a great manpower template that we're gonna present to you and show you in a few minutes. But really what it does is it lists every employee in your organization. And then it breaks down, as you go through the chart, really it breaks down how much overtime do they work in a year? Do we even think about overtime right now? That's a big one, right? Because overtime is usually paid out as time and a half. If we're not taking into consideration overtime wages, we're missing the mark on what we could be making profitability-wise on a job, right? So it breaks down all the overtime, all the benefits. Do we have a 401k match that we contribute to? How much does your insurance cost the business, right? We look at state and federal payroll taxes that the company is responsible for, and any other benefit that the company provides the employees. That could be a boot allowance, an auto allowance, a phone allowance. All that stuff by employee is listed out, and you get the true dollar amount of how much that employee is costing you every single hour or every single day, right? It's very, very important to take a look at your manpower schedule, and like I said, you can start it now, you can start it later, but I would recommend start this process now. Get a handle on how much your workforce is costing you so that you have that information when you bid. That is the most important piece, is producing an effective quote to your customer, understanding how much the organization is costing you. We have a manpower schedule that we can provide you like the one that you see on your screen right now. And I'll kind of walk you through from left to right of how this looks. But the first notable piece here is that there's cells and columns that are highlighted with gray sections. And those are the sections that need to be populated at a minimum. Once those sections are populated, everything else will auto-populate and tell you what your total indirect costs are, your total direct cost, broken down by payroll wages, benefits, and payroll taxes. So it's a pretty intuitive template that we've built. It allows you to make some changes, add certain benefits that we haven't considered with this example. So you're free to move things around. It's an interactive template, but at a minimum, the gray sections need to be highlighted. So starting from left to right, we have to list out all the employees. Moving then to the right is, are they a direct employee or are they an indirect employee? Right? This is very important when we comes down to the next section where we talk about efficiency, right? Direct versus indirect is very important. And you don't have to worry about any of the formulas. All you need to do is just note, are they indirect or are they direct?
What would be an example of a direct versus indirect?
A direct employee, it's a really good question, Scott. So a direct employee is an employee that's actually out there in the field performing the work. That's a driller, that is a driller's assistant, that is anybody else that you can think of that's on site that is performing work that we are billing a client for. That is direct. Indirect could be somebody like a scheduler that's scheduling jobs or working on quotes or bidding, right? Or a drill supervisor. If a drill supervisor is going from job to job, checking on progress, guiding, right? Breaking down barriers for the drill team, but they're not actually out there working, that's an indirect cost. So yes, it's an important piece of getting a project completed rather, and performing the work, but they're not actually out there doing the work, right? So they fall within the same bucket you'll see as an above the line cost of goods sold expense, but it's broken down differently when we look at efficiency. So it's very important to know. That's a very good question. So this Manpower document, once you take a look at and you enter all the employees' information and you enter their wage information, how much their hourly wage is, right? Then we have to look at overtime. Once again, this is a big piece that companies fail to realize, right? And fail to get into their quotes because overtime in most companies costs 1.5 times a standard wage. If we're not taking into consideration the amount of overtime that we're going to be paying them on a specific project, we could be missing the mark on overall profitability on that job. So it's very important that we look at that. Then we look at the benefits. Benefits are for health. Benefits are 401k and employee match that we provide. And then there's other benefits such as, uniform allowances and safety glass allowances and boot allowances, right? Those are all benefits. They're not huge, but they all add up. So it's important. You'll see a blank column there with the heading, add your benefit here. You can add one more there, or you can add several more columns there. Just make sure you check your formulas to make sure that those benefits are pulling over properly in the total form, in the total section. That's key. Moving on from there is your payroll taxes. You'll see some gray areas at the top that calculates your payroll taxes. Every state is different. Some states don't even have state payroll taxes. So it's important to check those gray sections up at the top to make sure those calculations are correct. The federal taxes, those typically don't change. If they do, you'll be made aware of that through regulations, right? But definitely check on your state taxes and make sure that those are in line with what is actually being calculated on employees' paychecks. So once all that information is correct, on the right-hand side, you see what it actually costs to employ that individual or that worker for an entire year, and you see what they make hourly versus what they make on a fully burdened basis. Remember, a fully burdened rate is their standard wage rate plus all of the other rates and all of the other costs to employ them that we've just talked about. So that fully burdened rate is definitely one that you want to be considerate of to make sure you're taking into consideration when you're quoting. Another thing to consider with a Manpower document is when you want to expand your business, what would it look like if we brought on 2 more people to the organization, right? How does that look? Having this template built and utilizing this, it's going to tell you if I bring somebody on that makes $30 an hour per se, right? How much it's going to cost us and the number that's going to hit our bottom line for that year. Then you have to ask the question, do I have enough revenue producing activities to go out and cover that cost, number one, or is this a direct employee that if we bring this employee on, then we can go out and bill more, right? So you're getting increased top line, you have increased cost of goods sold and direct expenses, but at the end, you have stronger profit margins as a result of it. This is a great tool to use if you're considering expanding your business and hiring more employees.